You know that feeling when your brain just feels completely full?
Oh, yeah.
Like maybe you're trying to prep for something important, a big meeting perhaps, and you've got, I don't know, a million tabs open and emails constantly pinging,
Yeah.
and you just feel like you cannot possibly absorb one more thing.
Totally overloaded.
Or even just trying to keep up with what's happening in a field you care about, and every article seems to lead to 10 more.
Right. It spirals.
That feeling, that's basically what we're diving deep into today. Information overload.
Yeah, it's really something, isn't it?
Yeah.
How much our relationship with information has shifted. I mean, think about it going from, mostly spoken word way back when to this constant digital barrage
It's night and day.
and information overload.
Yeah.
As some of our sources mentioned, like Mindful Health Solutions, Woodpecker, BCP Education, it's not just having lots to read. It's when the sheer volume, well, it just outstrips our brain's capacity to process it all. And that leads to real issues. Feeling confused, finding it hard to make decisions, stress, even just mental exhaustion.
That drained feeling.
Exactly.
Okay.
And one source specifically points out this digital explosion as a key, maybe the key driver.
Absolutely. It really does feel like trying to drink from a fire hose, doesn't it?
That's a perfect analogy.
And in today's world, it's always on, especially, I think, with remote work kind of blurring those lines between work and home life.
Oh, for sure. It makes it harder to switch off.
It can feel inescapable. So our mission today is really to, dig into how this constant flood impacts our mental well-being.
And crucially, what we can actually do about it.
Exactly. Pull out some effective strategies for navigating it. So consider this your shortcut to getting a good handle on the problem and some solutions without, getting buried yourself.
Good plan. And it's really important to grasp that this isn't just like a minor irritation. The mental health effects can be pretty significant.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sources really emphasize the psychological stress and anxiety. It comes from that constant bombardment, that feeling of needing to process everything.
You can't.
Right.
Yes.
And knowing you can't do it effectively, that creates this underlying mental unease, this instability.
It's like this background hum of anxiety almost. And it's not just personal, is it?
No, not at all.
Some sources suggest this collective overload contributes to wider issues, more anxiety and confusion across society, maybe even leading to things like mood swings, irritability.
Yeah, even depression is mentioned.
Yeah.
It's like our internal balance just gets thrown way off kilter.
Totally. And what about sleep? Does that come into it?
Oh, absolutely. Sleep gets hit hard. One source talks about how our desire to stay informed, plus being constantly connected.
Like checking your phone right before bed.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
It really messes with our sleep quality, disrupts our natural body clock, our circadian rhythms.
The blue light and all that.
Precisely. Makes it harder to wind down, leaves us feeling tired the next day, and not just physically tired, but mentally strained too.
Guilty as charged on the late night phone check. It's such a hard habit to break.
It really is.
And like you said, it's a vicious cycle. Then you're tired, so it's even harder to cope with all the information coming at you.
Exactly. Which brings us to attention spans.
Ah, yes. Seemingly getting shorter by the minute.
Well, the sources suggest this overload actually restricts our intellectual capabilities. It makes it genuinely harder to concentrate.
Reduces efficiency, productivity.
Right. And that just adds to the frustration and the feeling of being overwhelmed. It's ironic, isn't it?
It really is.
And this ties directly into something else the research highlights. Our brains have a finite processing capacity.
We're not computers.
Not even close. Our brains simply aren't designed for this unlimited simultaneous information flow. All that task switching we do.
Jumping between emails, messages, reading an article.
Yeah. It drains our cognitive resources.
Yeah.
It takes real mental energy to constantly shift focus like that. Leaves us feeling depleted.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. What about social media? That's a huge source of information, or at least content.
A massive one. And the sources point out how these platforms become breeding grounds for social comparison.
Ah, the comparison trap.
Exactly. We're constantly seeing these carefully curated highlights, these perfect moments from other people's lives.
Which aren't always the full picture.
Rarely the full picture. And it's so easy to measure ourselves against these often unrealistic standards. This can really put a dent in our self-esteem.
Yeah, fueling those feelings of inadequacy, like you're not doing enough or not good enough.
Precisely. And creating a pretty distorted view of what's normal or achievable.
And the impact on mental well-being.
It can be significant. It's not just a fleeting moment of envy. It can contribute to a really negative self-image, stir up dissatisfaction.
Affecting your daily life.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes you wonder, actually, about the evolutionary side of it. Are we wired to compare ourselves socially?
That's interesting. Like, it was maybe adaptive once, but now the digital world just amplifies it in potentially harmful ways.
Possibly. It's a thought. And it kind of links to another consequence the sources discuss. Decision fatigue.
Okay, decision fatigue. What's that exactly?
It's how this constant flood of information doesn't just stress us out emotionally, it actually makes it harder to make good decisions.
Because you're overwhelmed with options and data.
Exactly. We face so many choices every single day, big and small, and trying to sift through all the related information for each one, well, the quality of our decisions can start to decline,
So you just get worn out from deciding.
pretty much. And one source makes a really good point. It's not just the number of decisions, it's also their complexity, sometimes the emotional weight they carry.
Right, some decisions are much heavier than others.
For sure. And this fatigue can lead us to take mental shortcuts, maybe make impulsive choices just to get it over with.
Or just avoid deciding altogether. Procrastinate.
Exactly. None of which are great for, long-term success or well-being.
And if all that wasn't enough, burnout. Is that linked too?
Oh, definitely. Information overload is cited as a significant contributor to work-related stress.
Which can escalate.
It can escalate right into burnout, that feeling of deep exhaustion, feeling kind of detached or cynical about your work.
Negative feelings.
Yeah, and a noticeable drop in how effective you feel professionally is a really serious outcome of this constant pressure.
Wow. Okay, so stress, decision fatigue, burnout. What else?
There's also something called analysis paralysis.
Analysis paralysis sounds
That's
stuff.
basically it. It's when we get so overwhelmed by the sheer amount of information, we just keep overthinking, overanalyzing every little
To
detail.
the point where you can't actually make a decision or move forward.
Precisely. You just freeze. And you can see how that would really stall progress, especially at work.
Right. Just stuck in the data. And this ties into cognitive overload itself, right? That feeling of just being swamped.
Exactly. Cognitive overload is that state of being burdened by way more information than your brain can effectively handle or process.
Your brain's trying, though, trying to filter.
It is. It's constantly trying to separate the useful stuff from the noise. But, and this is a key point from the sources, multitasking completely undermines this.
Ah, the myth of multitasking.
It really is largely a myth in terms of efficiency. Constantly switching between tasks just wastes valuable cognitive resources.
Makes you less efficient overall.
Much less efficient. It's like trying to run too many demanding apps on your phone at once. Everything just slows right down.
And that creates this general feeling of being overwhelmed, maybe out of control.
Definitely. That excess information can leave you feeling stressed, overloaded, adrift even. It feeds into anxiety, partly through uncertainty.
And FOMO, fear of missing out.
Absolutely. That constant nagging feeling that you should be keeping up with everything, which is impossible, but the fear is still there.
Okay, and in this digital age, social media fatigue must be a big factor too.
Huge. It's defined as this negative emotional response to using social networks. Feeling bored by it, tired, even burnt out from it.
And linked to depression.
Often associated with depressive symptoms, yes. The stressors are things like that FOMO we just mentioned, overuse, just the sheer overload of content.
All hitting your mood.
Right, and potentially dragging down your performance in other parts of your life too.
And here's something really crucial, I think. When we're overloaded like this, it affects how we judge information itself, right? Makes us more vulnerable to bad info.
That's a critical point. When we're constantly bombarded, it becomes significantly harder to properly vet content, to evaluate its credibility.
So misinformation slips through more easily.
Exactly. False or misleading stuff can get past our mental filters much more readily when our cognitive capacity is already stretched thin.
Okay, so we've painted a pretty clear picture of the problem. It's significant. How do we fight back? What are the strategies?
Thankfully, there are quite a few good ones outlined in the sources. A really key one is the idea of a digital detox.
Stepping away from the screens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Regularly, consciously disconnecting, it allows you to be more present in the moment, it fosters mental clarity, and it definitely reduces stress.
Like a mental palate cleanser, one source called it.
I love that phrase,
Yeah.
yes. It's about deliberately managing how we interact with tech, setting some healthy boundaries.
So practical things, like putting your phone in another room sometimes.
Yeah, or setting time limits on certain apps,
Yeah.
maybe having phone-free days, or even just switching to reading a physical book before bed instead of screen time. Small changes can help.
Makes sense. What else?
Another really powerful set of tools involves mindfulness and meditation.
Ah, bringing awareness to the present moment.
Precisely. These practices act like sanctuaries for the mind. They help develop focus, balance, which is so essential for navigating all this complexity.
They really do help create that inner calm amidst the noise,
Yeah, regular practice gives you stability, lets you observe your thoughts and feelings without getting totally swept away by them.
which reduces stress, improves mood.
Definitely. And interestingly, mindfulness training might actually strengthen the brain's ability to direct attention where you want it to go.
So you gain more control over your focus.
In a way, yes. Then there's strategic information management.
Okay, what does that involve?
It's about being more structured,
Mm.
developing ways to filter and prioritize the information you let in, protecting yourself from the unnecessary clutter.
Being more intentional about consumption.
Exactly. Maintaining mental equilibrium by being selective.
And the sources also mentioned the basics, right? Lifestyle stuff.
Absolutely crucial. Things like regular exercise, good nutrition, getting enough sleep. These are fundamental. They build your mental resilience against overload.
And social connection.
Hugely important. Strong, positive social ties provide emotional support. They act as buffers against stress. Don't underestimate that.
Okay, so foundational well-being is key. What about more specific techniques for managing tasks and information flow day to day?
Right, so prioritizing is huge. Things like simple to-do lists can bring clarity, reduce that anxiety that you're forgetting something important.
Gets it out of your head and onto paper or screen.
Exactly. And then there's the Eisenhower matrix. Have you heard of that?
Vaguely, urgent versus important.
That's the one. Categorizing tasks by urgency and importance. It helps you focus your time and energy effectively and helps prevent that burnout we talked about.
Seems like a practical tool, and just writing things down helps.
Apparently so.
Hmm.
Making tasks concrete by writing them down seems to help with organization and makes them feel more manageable, less swirling around in your head.
Makes sense. What about boundaries, especially around work?
Essential. Defining and actually sticking to specific work hours is crucial for avoiding overwork and maintaining some semblance of work-life balance.
Easier said than done sometimes, but important.
Very. And turning off notifications, especially the non-essential ones when you need to concentrate, that creates space for deep work.
Definitely need to do more of that. Breaks, too, I assume.
Non-negotiable. Taking regular breaks is vital. The Pomodoro technique comes up.
Work sprints, then breaks.
Yeah, those focused work intervals followed by short breaks, it's great for maintaining concentration and stopping mental fatigue from setting in.
And you can enhance those breaks.
Yeah, suggestion is to maybe integrate a quick mindfulness exercise or a short meditation during the break. Really helps recharge and reduce stress.
Okay, good tip. What if the workload itself is just too much?
Well, delegation is an option, if possible. Handing off tasks that aren't core to your role frees you up to focus on high-value activities.
Makes sense. And collaboration tools.
They can really help streamline teamwork. Things like Google Workspace, shared documents, they facilitate knowledge sharing, make problem-solving easier without everyone duplicating effort.
Are there other tech tools that can help manage the information itself?
Yeah, some tools are emerging, like AI that can generate meeting summaries. That saves a lot of processing time.
Oh, interesting.
And features like automated action items or follow-up reminders can be super helpful for just staying organized and keeping track of things.
And for bigger projects.
Project management tools like Monday.com, Rike, Basecamp get mentioned. They give you that visual overview, track tasks and deadlines. Helps reduce the mental clutter of juggling lots of moving parts.
Okay, shifting slightly again. What about improving our own skills in handling information? Information literacy.
Yes, that's another critical piece. Information literacy is basically knowing when and why you need information, where to find reliable sources.
And how to evaluate it critically.
Exactly, and how to use it ethically.
Mm.
Developing these skills is key.
How does that help with overload specifically?
Well, it makes you more aware of your own consumption habits.
Yeah.
You get better at filtering, better at spotting credible stuff versus noise or misinformation. You become a more discerning consumer.
So you're not just passively absorbing everything.
Right. You're actively managing your intake.
And what about the workplace culture? Does that play a role?
A huge role. Creating an environment where people feel safe to say, hey, I'm feeling overloaded, or ask for help, that's vital.
Open communication.
Exactly. It reduces individual stress and actually makes teams more cohesive and supportive.
And promoting work-life balance from the top down.
Absolutely fundamental. Respecting boundaries, encouraging breaks, valuing time off, that needs to be part of the culture.
Organizations should also provide training, maybe.
Definitely. Offering education on managing information effectively, using the tools available, and general well-being strategies is a really positive step organizations can take.
Okay, just a couple more practical tips mentioned.
Yeah, one source had some simple but good ones, like try to make major decisions in the morning after you've rested. Your brain power is likely at its peak then.
Makes sense. Use your best cognitive
All
resources.
right, and maybe surprisingly, keep your workspace tidy. An organized physical space can actually reduce visual clutter and ease some of that mental overload.
Interesting. Less external chaos, less internal chaos.
Something like that.
Now, you mentioned filtering,
Mm.
but our brains have their own built-in filters, right? Cognitive biases.
Yes, cognitive biases. They add another layer of complexity to all this.
How do they fit in?
Well, they're essentially mental shortcuts. Systematic ways our brains simplify information processing, often based on our past experiences or existing beliefs. Personal filters, you could say.
And they affect what we pay attention to.
They do. They influence what we notice, what we remember, and crucially, what information we tend to trust or believe.
Which can lead to problems.
It can. It can lead to misinterpretations, inaccurate conclusions. Two common ones mentioned are confirmation bias.
Where we look for stuff that confirms what we already think.
Exactly. We favor information that fits our existing worldview. And the illusory truth effect.
What's that one?
That's where simply hearing a statement repeated multiple times can make it seem more believable, more true, even if it isn't. Familiarity breeds belief, essentially.
Wow. So overload makes it harder to vet info, and our biases can lead us astray even when we try.
It's a tricky combination. Though it's worth noting, the sources say our susceptibility to bias varies, and awareness or training might help reduce their impact.
Okay, that's good to know. What about an evolutionary perspective? Does that shed any light on our attention or how we react to all this?
Yeah, it's an interesting angle. Evolutionary psychology suggests our ability to pay attention, and emotions like fear were absolutely critical for survival back in the day.
Made sense to be alert to threats, focus on potential dangers.
Precisely. Our brains evolved as information processing devices shaped by natural selection to keep us alive. Healthy fear is adaptive. It warns us of real danger.
Now.
Now, sometimes that fight or flight response gets triggered by stressors that aren't actually life-threatening, like maybe a flood of emails or a difficult deadline.
Yeah.
That can lead to irrational fear or anxiety.
Our ancient wiring in a modern world.
Kind of. Even things like basic reflexes, fear, and disgust showing up early in babies. Those are seen as ancient adaptive behaviors.
Fascinating. Okay, one last area. Does information overload affect everyone equally, or are some people more vulnerable?
That's an important question. While it affects pretty much everyone to some degree, some groups do seem to be more vulnerable.
Like who?
Well, older adults are mentioned, maybe due to challenges with digital literacy or perhaps having different levels of trust in sources. Young people, too.
Still developing media literacy, dealing with social media pressures.
Exactly. Also, individuals with limited digital literacy or less access to education, and those experiencing information inequality where access itself is uneven.
And mindset matters too.
It seems so. People with very strong ideological stances might be more prone to confirmation bias, for example. And times of great uncertainty can make almost anyone feel more vulnerable to overload and misinformation.
Okay, so wrapping this all up then. The big picture takeaway seems clear. Information overload is a major, major challenge in our hyper-connected world.
Absolutely. It's not just annoying. It has real, tangible impacts on our mental health, our well-being, and even our ability to think clearly and make good decisions.
But the good news is, understanding how it works, understanding those mechanisms,
And actively using some of these coping strategies we talked about.
that's not just helpful, it's pretty much essential for navigating things effectively and, protecting ourselves.
It really is. It's about regaining some control.
So hopefully you, listening now, have a much clearer picture of why you might feel so overwhelmed sometimes by it all.
And more importantly, you've got a toolbox now. A whole range of practical strategies, from digital breaks and mindfulness to better task management and boosting your information literacy.
Things you can actually use.
Definitely. Which leads us to maybe a final thought for you to chew on.
Go for it.
Considering how fast information technology keeps evolving and how sophisticated information generation is becoming, think about AI creating content.
Oh, yeah, that's a whole other level.
Right. How will our strategies, both personal and societal, need to adapt in the coming years? How do we keep managing this flood to maintain not just our productivity, but our fundamental well-being?
That's a big question, something to reflect on. Maybe think about your own habits.
Exactly. Take a moment. reflect on how you consume information. And maybe pick just one or two strategies we discussed today, something small you could start implementing right away.